Hey there, welcome to the Breakfast Club. I'm Kazoom, and I'm late as usual. It seems to be my normal thing. Anyway, on the subject of news media, how corrupt it's become, how infotainment-y it's become, and all of that, I blame a lot of this problem on the 24-hour news cycle and how it's become corrupted. Granted, technically that cycle started with CNN in 1980. And back then, CNN would claim to have a 24-hour news cycle, but they kind of regurgitated the same news and actually the same clips over and over again. They kept repeating the same news. Which, I mean, yeah, it was on 24/7, but it wasn't 24/7 of different news. At least not in the beginning, not during the 80s anyway. Once the 90s came up, though, they started to truly become a 24-hour news channel. And by 1996, they had competition come up from Fox News and MSNBC. Yep, all in the same year, 1996. And to me, that's when we started to really see the decline of our news media. That's when it became all about, competing with other news channels to get the most viewers. That's not a good way to achieve being a valid news source, a reliable news source. It can't be just about money and views. There has to be some sort of other motive within there, something to try to get information to the people. That has to be somewhere in there. Originally, CNN wanted to be and were the ones to offer this kind of information to the people, something that hadn't really been offered before. Except in, 30-minute blurbs from ABC, NBC, CBS. So just that by itself gave CNN a lot more views than other networks. They didn't really have to work at it very hard. I mean, they were the only ones doing it at the time. So by 1996, the competition had started. And we were on our way to having news become nothing more than infotainment. At least on cable news, anyway. Newspapers and news magazines still had, other stuff in it, decent stuff in it, not just trying to get viewers. But of course, I mean, all news channels, all news websites, all newspapers want to get viewers, obviously. Shows like Crossfire, in which Crossfire started in 1982, those shows were decent, honest, informative shows when they first came out. They continued to be for a while. In fact, most of the stuff that CNN had up until 96, they were pretty decent in. But once they started getting that competition, shows like Crossfire started becoming just about getting views. It started becoming more about theatrics than actual news. By 2004, Crossfire was a joke. And Jon Stewart did a great job at pointing it out. Within just a few months after Jon's appearance on Crossfire, Crossfire was cancelled. I highly recommend watching the full footage of Jon Stewart on Crossfire. Well worthwhile watch. And we've all seen those types of stories that you find on cable news, especially channels like Fox News, where they'll put that carrot in front of you and trail you along until the end of the show or near the end of the show in order to give you a key piece of information. It's like, we have an important piece of information that you're really going to want to know. We'll tell you all about it after the next commercial break. And then, of course, continue trailing people along until the end of the show or near the end of the show, where, of course, you've had to watch all the commercials along the way. This sort of thing should have been unacceptable to everyone. But we just kept putting up with it, acting as though that's what's necessary to have cable news on the air at all. So we can blame the 24-hour news cycle on this, and we can blame capitalism on this for what happened after CNN started getting competition, and we have ourselves to blame a bit for this, for not complaining about this stuff, before it's too late. We should blame ourselves for letting it get as bad as it has. The only way I see this sort of thing coming to a halt is through legislation. I mean, it's the same thing as any other regulations we've had to put on a number of industries. anti-child labor laws, safety laws. Do the safety dance. You know, once capitalism starts to show that it's going to allow a type of business, an industry, to become corrupt, it's time to start regulating. And it'd be nice if that didn't have to happen, but that's what has to happen. Anarcho-capitalism doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Sorry. That's how you end up with child labor. That's how you end up with horrible working conditions. That's how you end up with the kind of news we currently have. On cable, anyway. We're going to have to put standards on news channels in order to be called news and not just infotainment. I mean, if some of these channels, if, you know, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, if they want to keep doing things the way they have, sure, you can call it infotainment, fine. Just don't call it news. And we're going to have to take away a small part of the financial drive for these cable news channels. They can afford to take a small loss. They can afford to take a medium loss, in contrast to all the other channels they own. Remember, our media is owned by 6 companies. None of the big 6 are going to go out of business. They're not going to go down the drain because they actually had to put out a news channel for the sake of putting out news. In fact, I think each one of the big 6 should be required to have a news channel. And I guess that's all I really have to say about it.